rudimentary, elementary. It's basically a child's drawing.
You know what Albert Einstein said? If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Josh went to great lengths to ground all of the science. So in the mechanics of each individual character's powers, the mechanics of travel through time and space, he was relentless in insisting that there be a solid foundation and that the designs or the costumes or the behavior reflected that science.
In terms of Reed's stretching and Sue's spectral abilities and Johnny's fire.
These are superpowers that started with who they were as human beings before anything happened to them. Reed's high-level intelligence, Ben, bravery, courage, Johnny's charisma and also courage, Sue in terms of her high-level intelligence. They all come into this with something very, very special. The core of their natural human powers that they came into this with are not changed, they're only heightened by the gifts that they're given.
So I wanted it to look like science, not like powers.
When they are escaping from their first visit to Planet Zero, the planet is almost attacking them because they're a foreign invader and it senses that. And as they're trying to escape back to Earth and the planet is attacking them, rocks and energy are being thrust at the shuttle. We wanted all of the powers to relate in some way to the planet where everything happens. So each of their powers somehow ties into Planet Zero and/or into the quantum gate.
We tried to tie the events of the shuttle accident with their powers. So you see Ben struggling to get the door closed and he's getting pummeled by rocks that's coming inside. Johnny, there's a little fire that kicks off in his shuttle and he's struggling and a fire comes through the window.
Sue doesn't actually travel to Planet Zero, but when they come back and everything goes wrong, there's a large blast of energy that takes her down, and that's actually where her powers grow from.
Reed is a tricky one. That was a little more sleight of hand. We showed Reed when he's trying to help Victor on the cliff's edge. Victor has fallen and Reed's trying to help him up. There's a little transference of an energy effect, and it's almost, if you're not looking, you'll miss it. Reed's arm stretches ever so slightly and then retracts. And that's kind of only our little telltale sign of Reed.
When we first see all of them after the accident, they're all confused and a little terrified. Reed has stretched himself out and doesn't understand what's happened.
We didn't want to make him, like, no offense to Stretch Armstrong, but as Stretch Armstrong, we tried to come up with something unique and original and believable, not silly.
We didn't want him to get too skinny and flimsy looking. We wanted him to stay sort of a masculine figure, so we cheated in a way to where we kept a lot of muscle structure and bone and tried to make his joints stay really visible to try and make it a little more believable.
One of the most interesting days that I had on set was when my character wakes up in the hospital, Area 57, and I kind of see my body, this and that, whatever. So what Josh would do is that he would talk to me over a microphone on what my hand was doing. He's like, now your hand starts to go through the brackets and kind of feel around, look around. And then there's a scene where I escape.
He's crawling in the vents and we see him stretched out. He's splayed out and retracting in. It looks painful with bones breaking or muscles moving.
Somehow she's shifting in and out of the visible spectrum. We don't know how.
Sue is kind of an internal person to begin with, so the fact that she goes invisible is very specific.
She's physically manifesting powers that have to do with force fields that emerge from her own transparency.
Sue's powers all come from the quantum gate, and they affect visibility and the way light wraps around her so that you're seeing the environment reflected off of her, and she, in a way, becomes invisible. She can also generate force fields around herself, and she can also throw force fields that wield power, almost like a bomb or a rocket.
When the quantum gate comes back to Earth and is affected by the explosion on Planet Zero, we wanted to tie those two effects together. Sue's energy and bubble with the quantum gate energy.
We went through a lot of research and development on Sue's bubbles. We wanted it to not look too much like water or too much like smoke. It needed to be sort of an energy plasma look to it, which was actually very tricky to come by. So it actually was one of the toughest effects to land on for us because it was something that we don't see very often.
I believe in the original comic and design of years ago, she has a blue glow around her, and we didn't want every shot of her to have a blue glow, but when she has her powers, she's got some blue glow that comes off her hands. There's a scene in the movie where she's pushing the containers, trying to exercise her abilities, and you see blue energy around her hands. That's being faithful to the look of the comics, is that blue energy.
One of the things Josh came up with that helped humanize using my power was he wanted to make it very clear that it's not easy. It's exhausting mentally and physically. It's as if to go invisible or to use a force field is as if I've run a marathon or that I've held my breath underwater for an inhuman amount of time.
And then for Johnny, well, he's on fire.
I think just the notion of a guy who can set himself on fire and fly is just naturally appealing.
Johnny is definitely the one who looks at this as a big opportunity to finally find his purpose. To be like, you know, maybe this is my thing, maybe this is my calling.
Johnny has this sort of uncontrollable fire core that's constantly burning inside of him. Fire on film is tricky because it's so bright and it's so hot that it blows out the frame really quickly. A lot of times you lose a lot of what's going on in the image because it's so bright and overexposed. You actually get more control over the look of the image using CG fire because you can take down some of those inherent photographic qualities of flame to make it more visible.
Early on, we went up to Vancouver and tested what does it look like. We got a stunt guy, lit him on fire, put him on wires, and flew him around.
And then we did additional tests where we had a CG version of a man on fire, and we would put them next to each other and see which look would give us the best result when we got to the end. And we went with the CG fire over the actual man on fire, although the man on fire looked pretty cool, I will admit. Johnny wakes up in Area 57 after going through the accident at the Baxter lab, and he finds himself engulfed in flames and doesn't understand what's happening to him.
The first time we see him, it's horrific as an audience. It's disturbing because you're seeing the guy engulfed in flames on fire, just sitting up and just being on fire and being terrified.
We wanted it to appear in a way like a man was just on fire. He's naked because his clothes have all incinerated off of his body, and he has no control over the fire. So his emotions are tied into his powers, and the more upset he gets, the more intense the fire gets.
It's something that you have to kind of work through and exercise. It's a muscle that has to get stronger. They're gonna send me on a project.
Like Ben?
We should use these powers to do something.
Some of the trickier parts of Johnny were when he was standing or when he was speaking. Reading lip sync through a man on fire is a little tricky. When he's in motion, it is a lot more forgiving because the fire moves and there's a lot visually to look at. It was actually quite difficult to convey emotion through a man who's completely on fire. The actor did an amazing performance, but once we lit him on fire, it was really hard to read a lot of his emotional performance. So we spent a long time trying to convey emotion through his flaming face. I know it's a shock, but Michael B. Jordan can't actually fly. So we did do some work with wires. He got to fly around on wires quite a bit. And then also we did a cyber scan of his body, and we created a digital version of him that we then would use to animate the scenes where he's flying. And all of the fire is simulated throughout the movie.
Victor, no. Just stop.
Out of my way, Franklin. I'm going home.
This is your home, son.
Victor gets trapped on Planet Zero, and in a way, Victor encapsulates the powers of all of them into one character. He has a little bit of each of the other characters' powers within him.
The landscape's changed.
How?
I don't know, it's just different.
It's almost like Victor, when he gets trapped there, has sucked all of the energy out of the planet and taken it for himself.
He becomes kind of the custodian for Planet Zero, if you will.
We develop suits which allow them to contain and control these conditions.
Containment suits are sort of rough around the edges, like it's technology, but it's beta technology. Reed's suit specifically has to do with holding his body together. So that's really where the term containment suit came from. It was in thinking about what Reed's suit does, and then it just really applies to the rest of them.
Reed built his suit from scrap, from whatever he can come up with. So we wanted to make sure that it had a very sort of just put together with anything he could get his hands on feel to it.
My containment suit looks like something I would have built. It's just a lot of bungee cords and stuff.
There are coils and bands that help him keep him there as he's learning to use his powers.
Reed's suit, as you see with the arms, are sort of like almost a spring system, which allows him to make use of stretching his arms out or his limbs for whatever purposes he might need. But it's a little bit more exposed. You can see the wires and the gack. It's not perfect looking just yet, so you're just implying that they'll keep inventing new stuff and perfecting and whittling and tweaking.
Johnny's suit was built supposedly by the government. Johnny is burning at 1,000 degrees or more at all times, so we have a suit that is made from some kind of fabric that helps allow him to control how much he flames and how much he doesn't flame.
Not only is he on fire, but he is a walking light source. So it was very important to me that we not cheat the lighting. So we built this light suit, and now because the technology in LEDs is so good, we were able to essentially build from head to toe a suit that he could wear that we could make very warm and flicker to look like firelight. And it was all run remotely from our dimming console. So Johnny could walk around and light the set just by that suit.
It flickered and changed and had different colors and hues of red and orange and white, and it would project light onto the characters that he was standing next to so that they would appear to be standing next to a man on fire.
Johnny, as far as filming is concerned, it's like 3 different looks, you know? You kind of go through the process of a light suit, you know, that shows like the flames and stuff, how it reflects off everything around me. And then you have the containment suit, and then sometimes you have to do a clean pass with like nothing, and I'm just, you know, naked. It's a little distracting for people on set, but we got past it.
So the suit was made from a stretch cotton. We printed 2 colors over there, some of it 3D, sort of a spider web effect. And these portions here that are solid black, in theory, don't disappear with her. And a lot of this cording is to give the feeling that there is some sort of technology involved to these different sensors, which we have all around her.
We don't consider them our superhero suits. I play it as though it's not something that I am proud of. It's not a good thing. But as an actor, it's pretty fun. When we're all together, it makes a lot of sense. And they're all very specific and different, which is cool.
It's clobbering time!
Ben gets the worst of it, if I'm honest. I think I have the worst affliction. I'm literally a rock with eyes.
He is, by default, a gentle giant, but there's this rage within him. If you're gonna trigger that, he can be pretty scary. I went to a lot of references about skin disorders and growths and fungi and all sorts of like horrifying things that happen. Just to see the ugly side of something kind of like in this nature. It's this hardened rock-like growth that has enlarged a regular-sized person into about 5 to 7 inches taller and wider than he was. And it has to look painful. It has to be tragic.
This one's a little bit more of a departure from the comic. Josh really wants to bring in very realistic textures. He wants the character to feel very uncomfortable and like he's in pain and miserable, and wants to show that with the rocks grinding together and dust coming out, to make it more like a moving mountain.
The Thing essentially becomes encased in a rock shell. He's still underneath there. He's not completely made of rock. There is a soft man underneath, which is what enables him to still move after he becomes encased in rock. He is a man who is fused underneath a bunch of rock. that sort of becomes an exoskeleton.
For much of the film, the thing will be CG. So Jamie is doing the hardest of things, which in some ways is acting through not just the makeup, as the cliche goes, but through the visual effects and through his performance, giving us a tremendous amount of information as to how that character will behave and express himself.
Obviously, Thing is much larger than Jamie Bell, so we had Jamie Bell on stilts for a good portion of the film and dressed in a very court jester-like motion capture suit that we used to track all his movement and then extrapolate that and put it into the CG character.
To be on stilts and things like that, and for camera I had to wear certain things so they knew my scale and size. They're useful for me because you get a sense of like, wow, I'm bigger than everyone. Especially when I'm really not that big. I'm only like 5'8", so I'm usually all the time smaller than everybody else. So weirdly having that extra height on set and for the character, like it does kind of change your mindset a little bit for sure.
Ben is motion capture performance and animation reference, so there are mixed methods there in terms of Jamie's performance, but you're always getting the eyes of Jamie. The eyes are a huge communication tool to the world.
We also did a facial shape capture, so they capture all these different shapes that everyone makes with their face when they say different words, when they are happy, when they're sad. So they go through a whole range of emotions and words and syllables and things, and we capture all of that with about 35 cameras or so that are placed on a big wall around him as he makes all these expressions.
Jamie's just impressed us all so much each day with what he brings, and it's a character that doesn't say a lot and yet communicates a ton, and Jamie's done that beautifully.
You want it to be believable and cool, but we don't have a rock guy that we can go down the street and ask him what it's like to be a rock guy. The dynamics of a bunch of rocks together and moving against themselves is really some tough geometry to work out that our friends at MPC worked out. So if he moves too light, then he doesn't have weight, and we still have to be faithful to gravity. So you're making it up, but you're still trying to be faithful and loyal to real-world dynamics.
Look at me. I'm not your friend. You turned me into something else.
I really wanted to find something that looked both incredibly real, believable, tragic, and hard to look at, but at the same time, hard to look at for Reed.
Because even though a lot of it's CGI, as an audience, if you don't see us going through it, you don't buy it. The CGI really can only go as far as what reality we're making convincing.
Running away again?
No.
George Little and I worked for a really long time conceiving what Dr. Doom, what Victor's suit, costume, wardrobe, outfit, mask, what that was going to look like.
So this is our fourth person who goes to Planet Zero and gets left behind, and we come back to find him, and he's developed, these are portions of his suit, a lot of it's melted. Somehow it's all just sort of melded into one. There's sort of the assumption here that the plexiglass of the helmet melted onto him. This is his face. This is who he is.
His suit would be the EVA suit fused into his body, which is grotesque and uncomfortable and kind of frightening and disturbing, and that there would be ideas reminiscent of what we're familiar with the traditional Doom costume.
He amalgamates his EVA suit, his environment suit, into something that he can live in, something that he can survive in.
They would be wearing rebreathers on their face that would inadvertently be melded onto his face, and that's what is kind of looks like the Dr. Doom mask.
We went in and helped doctor it a little bit. We just kind of brought up the metal pieces and shaved a little bit of the folds in the suit. And then to bring out the energy effect, in Victor, we see this greenish energy coming through. We kind of tried to give him an internal greenish glow that's coming out in cracks in the suit, cracks in the skin, you know, little hints of it in his face.
We wanted to use green primarily because green is really the color of Dr. Doom from the comics. He wears this green cape, and since our costume had no green in it, we thought it was the perfect way to sort of bring the green from the comics but give it sort of a new twist.
The failures of my generation are the opportunities for yours. There are no greater minds than the ones in this room.
There's a sort of aspirational quality to the Fantastic Four because of the science element, that they're people who actually believe that they can change the world or explore the world by using their brains.
Reed, all he wants to do is build this quantum gate. It's like a quantum gate in every scene.
There are 5 gates. We go from the garage to the science fair to Baxter. Then when it all goes wrong, he then goes to Argentina and he makes a version of the science fair one, but a much more developed version. And then we go to Area 57, which we sort of call the NASA version, which is the high end.
Reed thought he was building a teleportation device in his garage. When he meets Dr. Storm, he tells him that this isn't a teleportation device, that he's cracked interdimensional travel.
In Stanley and Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four, you have 4 characters that get into a rocket and go into space. They encounter cosmic rays, and that transforms them into who we know now as Fantastic Four. Our version of Fantastic Four is not really that much different in that they do go to another place. That other place is another dimension, as that's sort of one of the big topics in cutting-edge science today, is not just the idea of space exploration, but interdimensional exploration.
I didn't think interdimensionality or multidimensional science was a real thing, and as we dug into it and talked to lots of different scientists, it is the sort of next frontier of theoretical physics and ultimately of real physics.
We were pulling in scientists from all over the place with different specialties to kind of give us an understanding of space and time, to give us an understanding of charged environments, charged particles, how it is the powers might work.
We talked to a lot of different specialists, theoretical physics, to make the language feel real and naturalistic.
Once you get into all these deep layers of physics and chemistry, it's like the depths of the ocean. There's a ton that just has not been explored. People are constantly retracting and building upon theories that they thought were true that, maybe aren't. And so my job as an actor is that you need to sound like you know what you're talking about.
There's a speech in the movie that Dr. Storm gives the board when he's trying to get them to approve the quantum gate.
We need real-world applications.
This has real-world applications. I truly believe that there is
an entirely new universe just beyond our ability to see. Yes, I've read your paper.
Once we get there,
if we get there,
we'll be able to discover new resources, energy sources, which will revitalize our own. This is our chance to learn more about our planet and maybe even save it.
And that speech is largely taken from different research I've done of scientists who were talking about the possibilities of interdimensional travel, of figuring out more about our dimension, our world, by looking at how other worlds and other dimensions have evolved.
Imagine if you can travel to another planet in an instant. That would change everything. I mean, how many years it would take to get to another planet that has a bunch of stuff that we could use to help heal and fix our own planet.
Set design on this thing is really, really good. It's like once we show up, there are all these things that kind of help your reality. And that's beneficial.
There's a rigor in the approach that starts with Josh Trank that is in absolute control over color palette and camera movement and the scope and nature of the production design that gives the movie a very real, almost seductively gloomy underpinning.
So, who else lives here?
Just my mom and stepdad.
They don't care about all this?
They don't understand it.
This is Reed's garage gate. This is the gate that Reed and Ben build in his garage. So it was sort of essential that we literally use all parts that you could find in a junkyard, which we did.
When they're younger, it's a much cruder piece of architecture. There's a lot of wires and chaos, and it's a little hard to understand. We tried to make it a little rougher, a little more uneven and childlike.
I'm just looking for a power converter. I'm building something.
That teleporting thing?
I go into his junkyard to steal parts, and the junkyard's kind of like a family-owned business, chop shop kind of thing.
My favorite set that we filmed on was the one in my garage.
Me too,
because it vibrates, the ceiling's falling with sand or dust, and then sparks are shooting out everywhere. And it's just the coolest thing to see, and it was loud. We actually had to wear earplugs to not kill our ears.
Now! So cool, like when I first saw it, I was just like, wow, who built that thing and how long did that take? 'Cause
It was really cool. Wires everywhere, every corner you look, there's wires. There's all different mechanic machines.
It's sort of the garage. If you grew up in the 80s or the 90s, like this garage is your dream garage. He has a rack of Nintendo 64s, which are used for like their CPUs and stuff like that. And he's building this teleportation device in his garage, and it actually works and functions.
We did a lot of research on this, and there are actually kids out there doing this kind of stuff. There's one guy, I think he works at NYU, who actually at 13 had made a particle accelerator in his garage.
And then we cut to so many years later, and they're 17 years old, and they're at the science fair.
This is a cymatic matter shuttle. Me and my associate Ben have been working on it every day since 5th grade when we launched the beta version in my garage. And today is our first public demonstration. What does it do? It modulates the frequency of matter from one location to another and back again.
This is a movie that celebrates the possibilities of the world. That some kids can have a science fair project that ends up transforming themselves and transforming the world. The possibility of that, I think one feels when they're a kid.
Ben's joined him, and Ben's been able to help him create this slightly more refined, more developed version of the first garage one.
This is years later where Reed and Ben have really refined the project. There's a laptop computer that goes with it because now they're taking that energy and they're refining it in such a way that they can hopefully get stuff there and back.
In high school, I'm building this thing. I'm like excited to show it. I've finally done it. And then it kind of works, but not really.
The first time that they had some kind of experimentation together, Reed kind of knocked out the power for the entire neighborhood. The science fair at school, you know, stuff blew up and it was a bit crazy.
It's all about transferring energy into waveforms that then open up the spaces between atoms and allow the gate to open. So using all of these, you know, these are jamming energy this way, these are firing it into this section.
Then we go to Baxter Building, and the initial quantum gate with what we call the fly swatters on either side.
The Baxter Institute is kind of like a magnet program, a government-funded think tank in Midtown Manhattan, and it was founded by Dr. Franklin Storm, and this is kind of our version of it, which is, I think, is a lot closer to Millar's version of Baxter than any other version of Baxter if we were to compare it to the comics.
There's a lab here in Baton Rouge that attached to LSU called CAMD, and they are doing all this particle research there. And we shot a section of the movie there. That gave us a lot of detail, a lot of inspiration for the main big set.
All these characters need is a big place to do their work.
When you go into the labs and you see the magic that's being worked on in person, it's incredibly inspiring because you can really see how it's all being made. And I just knew that this movie, if out of any superhero film, needs to have that quality because Fantastic Four is so much about science.
In building this gate, we're trying to keep a basic shape, and that's essentially Reed's formula. He's discovered how this shape works with this particular technology. So we've tried to keep that all the way through the movie, so there's a kind of continuity through the movie. We've tried to keep a lot of the sort of coils and copper and elements like that in order to try and give it that sort of gravitas, really. It's all about power. It's this machine that eats power. We've had a lot of challenges regarding shooting out of continuity, so we've had to destroy it and then rebuild it and then destroy it. So it's been interesting, fun.
This is the one that Reed's working on in Argentina, presumably to basically go back and rectify what has happened. And again, it's just something that years later, Reed's pulling different parts together. It has to have a different level of polish, and yet it all has to look similar to the gates that you see on stage 4 here, which is this, but exploded to an entire soundstage.
The whole Area 57 complex was fun to do because it was just so big.
We tried to keep it with the same visual language, but yet give it the sense of this is 2.0 and this is a darker, more menacing group of people.
Area 57 was an abandoned hospital. We took a lot of research of contamination labs and general experimentation kind of environments, and then augmented that into the direction that we wanted to go. We are now in the basement of Area 57, and we ended up building a lab. We ended up bringing a lot of the component parts from the hospital to here, the doors and all the fixtures and fittings. It helps us tie the two places together for continuity. And we've gone from the garage all the way to this militarized gate.
Made it ugly.
We were just over in the Area 57, the actual lab where we built the gate at. And in between setups, I'm sitting down at some random desk that's there, and I'm just kind of like, you know, being nosy, peeking through, and there's all these instruments that I'm like, I don't know what this is. It looks legit, looks expensive. It's pretty heavy. So they pay attention to everything.
Every single set that I've been on this movie, you know, from the Baxter corridors or to his dorm room or to the quantum gate or wherever it is, there's always a sense of like, this is a real place. This really exists.
All the sets have been incredible. None of them feel like sets to me, so I genuinely forget that we're in a studio. It really does feel exactly like we're in the buildings that are written. It's really remarkable.